What's wrong, Joseph?
I'm never going to be able to memorize these combo lines before tonight's video.
Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, back again with another episode of 10-Minute Testing. After nearly 18 years practicing Salamangreat in the hyperbolic time chamber, I have finally emerged as the Salamangreatist, the single duelist with a complete grasp of the involved and intricate art of opening Gazelle. So here's the list, and that's hot. They're on fire, get it? As always, I'll give you a little bit of background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and as always, the card by card. So firstly, for those of you that don't know, Salamangreat is an archetype of Cyberse-type monsters used by Soulburner in Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains. Their monsters share two common characteristics. First, each has two effects, usually one that activates in the hand and one that activates in the graveyard. And second, their Link monsters possess the uncanny ability to link into themselves. This might feel wrong from a moral perspective, but I can promise you this incestuous interaction feels so right if you're the one doing it. Their two main combo pieces, Salamangreat Gazelle and Salamangreat Spinny, are easily searched by their quick play reinforcement of the army and Lady Debugger, and their turn 1 setups resemble ritual beasts in that they aren't game-winning build-a-boards, but they do allow you to amass enough resources to slowly overwhelm your opponent over the next couple of turns. Our list looks quite different than the ones you're probably familiar with. Most of that is because we're missing a significant amount of our playmaking tools, things like Speedroid Terrortop, thank God, our OCGs have been blessed with. Instead, we're opting to play a few cards that should clear up the boards that I expect to be popular in the coming months, the multiple spells from Sky Striker and Altergeist, and the Gold Sarcophaguses and Thunder Dragons that Ghostbell preys upon, and the calls necessary to ensure that our turn 1 setups go our way. We've also got a Super Polymerization package in here, which is an exceptionally cute way to out-problem links alongside Salamangreat Violet Chimera. So with that, let's get into the card by card. First, our Playmakers. 3 copies of Lady Debugger, which is basically a Stratos for Cyberse. 3 copies of Gazelle, which can be special summoned from the hand when a Salamangreat is sent to the graveyard, then sends a Salamangreat from your deck to the graveyard when it's summoned. After that is its usual target, Spinny, who can be discarded to give a monster 500 attack, and special summoned from the graveyard if you control a Salamangreat. After that is Foxy, who area zeros for a Salamangreat card and can destroy face-up spells and traps if it's in the graveyard. Foxer, who can destroy spells and traps from hand if you are already set up, and reborns when a spell or trap is popped. Jack Jaguar, who can special summon himself from the graveyard by returning a Salamangreat from your graveyard to the deck. Falco, who can recycle spells and traps from the graveyard and recur himself. And Mole, who most people aren't playing, but returns Salamangreat cards to your deck to draw cards. For hand traps, we're on 3 Ash and 3 Bell. For spells, we're on Foolish, 3 Called, 3 Twister, 1 Super Poly, 3 Circle, which is either Chalice or Rhoda for Salamangreats, Heart, which is Valhalla Hal of the Fallen with a Soul Charge attached, and Sanctuary, which allows your Salamangreats to link into themselves. For traps, we've got 3 Infip, then 1 Rage, the Regeki Break, and 1 Roar, the Judgment. In the extra deck, we've got Violet Chimera with materials of a Salamangreat and a Link, Fusion Dragon with materials of 2 Darks, Baguska, who is a combo payoff, 2 Mirage Stallion, who special summons Salamangreats from the deck, and Kieran's if it's used as Link material, Bamboozling Gossip in case you need another rank 3, Boral Sword and Phoenix, and our Salaman Links. Heath Leo shuffles back spells and traps and reduces attack if he's used with himself. Sunlight Wolf recurs monsters from the graveyard and recurs spells and traps if he's used with himself. And Veilynx, who adds a Sanctuary to hand and prevents destruction while in the graveyard. So with that, let's jump into the games. Our first match is up against Dark Magician, and I don't know what it is, but every single person on YGO Pro this week was playing DM. We're going second, which is not ideal. Our opponent's going to start by firing off a couple of spell books, drawing a few cards, special summoning a copy of Apprentice Illusion Magician to add Dark Magician to hand, setting 3 and passing back. We're going to fire off Twin Twisters, seeing if we can just randomly win the game here. Unfortunately, we don't, and our opponent is able to activate Magician's Navigation, getting the DM out of their hand, and a Magician of Dark Illusion from their deck. We're going to special summon a copy of Gazelle, sending a Jack Jaguar to graveyard, fire off a circle, normal summon a Foxy. We find, Ooh, a Spinny. That's interesting. We're going to add that to hand before going into a Valynx. Valynx is going to add a Sanctuary. We'll set said Sanctuary before using Spinny's Grave Effect to go into Mirage Stalio. We'll special summon a Mole because we have everything else. We'll go Wolf into Wolf. Foxer is going to be sent to the graveyard to destroy the last spell and trap before we reborn this copy of Jack Jaguar, triggering the effect of Wolf so we can set this copy of Roar pretty safely. We'll pass it back to our opponent. They can, of course, go into Galaxy Tomahawk, but we do have the Judgment for it. Unfortunately, our opponent draws what effects to an MST, and now they can pop off with number 42. They fill their entire board with tokens, and I'm thinking, okay, what is the worst possible board we're going to have to beat? This does trigger Wolf at the very least. They'll go into Link Spider, Cerberus, Phoenix, another Link Spider, and Borreload. Okay, as far as end bosses go, Borreload is not that big of a deal because, of course, we have a Borrel of our own. We'll go ahead and get him out now. The first thing we're going to do is go into Valynx. That triggers the effect of Gazelle in hand. We will then send a copy of Heat, go into a second copy of Valynx. We can then recur Roar, then go into Borrel Sword Dragon. We'll send Spinny to the graveyard to give it 35, so even if our opponent tries to get cute with Borreload Dragon, we can beat over it. We will do just that and then get in for 3,500 before passing it back to our opponent. What do they draw for their turn? But an Eternal Soul. Now, that's a pretty good card, but doesn't beat our board. They will set it and pass it back, and of course, we'll start popping off as soon as possible, and they'll concede in response. Our second round match is up against Pendulum Magicians, and oh boy, this is not a good hand. Thankfully, it does have a copy of Gazelle in it. This showcases the one-card combos the deck is capable of. We'll start by normal summoning this copy of Gazelle, then sending a copy of Spinny to graveyard. We will reborn the Spinny with its own effect before going into a Mirage Stalio, using its effect to special summon a Jack Jaguar, before going into a Sunlight Wolf, reborning the Jack Jaguar, adding this copy of Gazelle back to hand, going into Valynx, using Valynx's effect for the field spell, using Sanctuary to special summon a second Valynx, setting 2 cards and passing it back. So now we have a protected board for literally no investment. Our opponent's going to activate the Grave Effect of Darkworm. We thankfully do have a Go Spell. They're then going to set Scales. We will Twin Twisters in response. That should be the end of the game, but unfortunately the last card in their hand is a Chronograph Sorcerer, which was otherwise stranded. They'll attack as best they can, but of course they can't destroy our board because we have a Valynx at graveyard. They'll then go for an Electromite. We will flip up this copy of Infinite Impermanence, and just like that, we are at parity, except Gazelle is a fantastic card. We're going to use Jack Jaguar first. That's going to turn into a Valynx so we can trigger Gazelle's effect without using our normal summon. Our opponent will respond with a Fogblade, and that should be all she wrote. Next, we'll go into Heat Leo, returning this copy of Fogblade to deck. Using Spinny's effect and going into Mirage Stalio, we should be able to amass enough advantage here that our opponent can possibly win. We'll attack for 200 and 2,300 direct before, in main phase 2, normal summoning a second Gazelle and going into Gossip Shadow to counter the Darkworm in graveyard. Our opponent is going to concede after drawing Harmonizing. Alright, so it's time for Game 3, and you know what that means, a best of 3 versus meta. Our opponent is on Burning Abyss, despite what this hand might imply. Our hand isn't particularly exciting either. We have a copy of Salamangreat Sanctuary, which we never want to see in the opener, 3 cards that aren't Salamangreats, and Lady Debugger. Unfortunately for our opponent, Lady is an incredibly powerful combo setup tool. We'll start by normal summoning said Lady Debugger to get a copy of Salamangreat Gazelle to our hand, before going into a Valynx, setting this copy of Sanctuary, going into a second Valynx to trigger the effect of Gazelle, sending a copy of Spinny to graveyard before special summoning a Mirage Stalio, getting a Jack Jaguar from deck, and going into Wolf. Afterwards, we're going to use Jack Jaguar's Grave Effect to special summon itself at point to add Gazelle back to our hand, and pass it back to our opponent. It's free real estate, folks. Our opponent rips a tour guide off the top, always, before special summoning an Edge of Sabers and using Dante for 3. One of those 3 is Farfa, so they will banish our copy of Mirage Stalio before going into a copy of Beatrice. We will Yakashi Warashi this copy of Edge of Sabers, but they do trigger our Wolf, and we are able to protect it with the Valynx in graveyard. At end step, we get Mirage Stalio back, which should be enough to win the game. We draw a Gazelle for turn. We're going to go into Valynx to trigger the effect of Gazelle, sending a copy of the Trap. We'll then go into Heat Leo, that triggers the Grave Effect of Mirage Stalio, so we can return this copy of Beatrice, and we should be able to win through Snow here by careful use of Spinny to make sure that the Wolf we just went into has over 2,300 attack. We'll then special summon the Spinny to our side of the board, and our opponent will use Snow and concede. Alright, so it's time for Game 2. Our opponent has elected to allow us to go first. That's a frightening sign. Our draw isn't particularly good. We have a copy of Lady Debugger, which is good, but just too much stuff we're trying to normal summon here. We're going to start by normal summoning a Lady Debugger, then using her effect to get a copy of Gazelle to hand. Same combo as last time. We'll then go into a copy of Valynx, adding a copy of Sanctuary from deck, setting said Sanctuary, going into a second Valynx to special summon this Gazelle from hand, sending a Spinny to graveyard, special summoning the Spinny, going into a Mirage Stalio, getting a copy of Jack Jaguar from deck before going into a Wolf, using Jack Jaguar's effect to reborn itself at link point to add a copy of Gazelle back to our hand, and setting 1 card. I just want to open Roar, for Christ's sake. Our opponent starts with a Light of Sekka. They'll use Math's effect, and I figure that's as good as anything to Infinite Impermanence, but unfortunately they do have a way to get a monster to their side of the board. They will get Collapse Serpent as well before using Destrudo's effect, and oh god, it's Yazi. Okay, I'm pretty sure we're dead at this point, so after Jack Jaguar is destroyed, we will special summon Gazelle just to get another blocker. They're going to go into, Mare Mare. That's going to add 1 token to their side of the board, a second token, they'll go into Linkuriboh for 1 additional additional token. Afterwards, they're going to go into a copy of Reproducus and Borrelsword Dragon. And there's Orbital Hydralander. Even though they whiff, that represents 3,000 points of damage. They'll go into White Wyvern Buster and a copy of Dante as well. They'll attack directly, attack once again, and attack with Borrelsword Dragon's second effect. We will use Salamangreat Sanctuary's effect to gain some life points, but we'll lose the game regardless. Alright, so it's time for that all-important Game 3, and I am taking no chances. I have elected to go first, and it's the same hand again! A bunch of monsters we want to normal summon and some mediocre interaction. Well, at the very least, I can make you sit through this combo one more time. We're going to start by normal summoning a copy of Lady Debugger to get a copy of Gazelle to hand. At least we get to add this copy of Sanctuary to hand instead of hard drawing it. We'll Valynx into Valynx to special summon this copy of Gazelle from our hand, sending a copy of Spinny so we can go into Mirage Stalio, getting a Jack Jaguar from deck. Afterwards, we'll go into Wolf, then use Jack Jaguar's Grave Effect in order to special summon itself, this time in defense position so we don't die to Borrelsword. We'll set 2 cards and pass back to our opponent, and they draw a Sekka for turn! First is Chubby Snack, special summoning itself to the side of the board. Of course, the discard is Fiendish Rhino Warrior, allowing them to get Edge Imp Sabers. They'll use Gallus as well, before going into Trisbania and Dad. So I negate Dad here, because I think if I don't, I am just completely dead. Then I'll use Twin Twisters to destroy my own cards before my opponent reveals their hand has 2 Hydralanders in it. Thankfully, they whiff, but this is going to be the entirety of my board destroyed. Now, call me crazy, but I think we actually might be able to bring this one back. The first thing we do is draw Roar. We're going to start by normal summoning this copy of Gazelle, sending the Destruction Trap. Then we'll special summon this Spinny from Graveyard, special summon Jack Jaguar at a link point before going into Wolf twice the hard way. Wolf is going to add the Destruction Trap back to our hand. We will set it and Roar, attack over this White Wyvern Buster, and pass it back to our opponent. They draw for turn, it's Mare Mare, but of course they have Sekka in Graveyard, so instead it's Calcab. They'll return it to the top of their deck to special summon Edge Imp Sabers. We will respond to their Trisbania effect with our copy of the Destruction Trap, and now all we have to out is Trisbania. That's super doable. We draw for turn, and it's Lady Debugger. Christ! We're going to start by going into a Heat Leo, triggering Gazelle's effect. We're going to use Wolf beforehand in order to add this copy of Sanctuary back to our hand because we destroyed it with Twin Twisters instead of it being banished. We now can span the board with our remaining Salamangreats in Graveyard, normal summon a Lady Debugger, and our opponent concedes. So we're back, and I can feel my brain throbbing with the awesome power of summoning Gazelle. Now this deck is rad, but as always, let's do the pros and cons. First, the pros. 1. The combos are incredibly easy to start. All 3 of the hands in the last set represented the absolute bare minimum necessary to perform setups, and they were still enough. Hands with more extension can easily make the Negation Trap, Baguskas, or Gossip Shadows. 2. The lines are advantage neutral. You're never going super minus in order to set up. Even the main Gazelle combo costs you effectively 1 card, and everything you've amassed that isn't on board returns to your hand, so you can try again next turn. And 3. It's going to be cheap. Now, I'm not 100% sure on this, because Konami is Konami, and Sunlight Wolf could always be a short-printed secret, but outside of Borrelsword, this is almost a structure deck-only deck. And the cons. 1, I know we are all creaming ourselves over those OCG results, but it is hard to justify this in a world where TCG has Sky Striker. Both decks have an unreal ability to play through hate, but Sky Striker generates infinitely more pressure. 2, the loss of some OCG-specific cards really hurts. Without stuff like Terror Top allowing for expansive and unmatched combo lines, us plebes in the USA are forced to play huge, bricky suites of hand traps or atrocious garnet ratios. And 3, it's hard. Like Ritual Beast, it is a lot of effort to learn what you're doing. I'm sure I'm going to catch heat in the comments for misplaying, for a reward that really doesn't rival the likes of Geist or Thunder Dragon's completely simplistic openers. All in all, I can't believe I slept on this deck for so long. It is explosive, it's interesting, and it's a blast to play. It feels strong, but not oppressively so. The games I played were more often slow attrition wars instead of wombo combo blowouts, and if that's the direction the next format is headed in, then you can catch me burning my soul this February. So that's that. Glad to have this one under my belt. It had been gnawing at me. If you have an idea for a certain deck or archetype you'd like to see me play on a future episode of this show, let me know in the comments section below. And if you want to see me play the decks I make on this show on stream, I'm on twitch.tv/mbtygo every Monday from 10 to midnight Eastern Standard Time. Otherwise, I'll see you Thursday.